Good afternoon, everybody. This is Greg Kahn from the IoT Consortium. We're excited to have you join today's virtual conference series, and we'll be kicking off in about 2 minutes. So we'll let a few more people join in this pre-Labor Day Wednesday, and we will get started about 3 minutes after the hour. Hey everyone, this is Greg from the IoT Consortium, and we're going to get started now. We are thrilled to kick off this late summer session with you, and we have many exciting activities brewing at the IoT Consortium, including our first podcast launching early fall and our first New York-based summit, IoTC Next, launching on November 12th in New York City. But today I'd like to welcome you to our second 4-part live virtual conference series on the topic of the connected home. We've gathered together an exceptional group of industry experts who will facilitate these webinars with the objective of educating you, industry leaders, consumers, and IoT enthusiasts on the topics of security and health within smart home technology. This conference series starts today and continues for 3 consecutive Wednesdays until September 18th. Participants will be able to ask questions and interact with each of the presenters in real time. So I highly encourage you to type in your questions during the presentation in that Q&A box on the lower part of the screen. And our presenter will address as many questions as possible after the live presentation. If you have questions afterwards, please send them on to us at marketing@ifthings.org, and we'll do our best to send them to Lee to address. Without further ado, would love to introduce today's session, the disruption of emerging trends, smart home security, which is facilitated by one of our member companies, Allegion. Today, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter and a very good friend of the IoTC, Lee Odess, who's the Vice President of Service Provider Business in the Americas at Allegion. Lee's presentation will be about the #1 priority of homeowners, the rapidly changing evolution of the state of security, both internally and externally, and discussion of new business models. Without further ado, Lee, if you're ready to go, I'll turn it over to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And I appreciate everybody taking the time today to spend a little bit of time talking about a subject that I myself find very interesting and hope that you do as well. So to kick it off, so like I said, like Greg said, I've been with Allegion about 1.5 years. The team that I lead focuses on the partnership side. So we're involved heavily with different companies, big and small, that are taking our products and solutions to bring them into an overall ecosystem, which gives us a nice, unique view into sort of what the trends are that we're seeing in the market, not only today, but then also tomorrow. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Get used to this. There we go. So to tell you a little bit about Allegion, I thought we'd start there. Some of you are familiar with them, but really we're rooted in 100 years of history focused on protecting people and places that matter globally. The places that we focus on and the different products you'll see, they go across from everything from locks, keys, and levers to portable to electromagnetic that we have to exits and openers, and it goes across both commercial and the consumer side. So a lot of breadth, a lot of depth when it comes to the product side. And a lot of known brands that you maybe are familiar with, like people like Schlage and Kryptonite and Simon's Voss and as such. So as you can see, large span of products that fit a lot of different solutions. And I think puts us in a nice position to be somewhat of a subject matter expert when it comes to this. So my goals for today in this presentation was to really spark a discussion, and I hopefully you take advantage of the Q&A. And we can have that conversation. It's also to give a point of view. And to be clear, it's sort of my point of view of how we see the market responding to the security industry and what that actually means today, but then also tomorrow. And then I put together some 3 takeaways that you can think about. So if we look at the title, The Disruption and Emerging Trends of the Smart Home and Security, I've highlighted disruption because the question I have around this is it actually disruption? Or as I look at it, to me, it feels a lot like an evolution. And it actually, part of it really does feel like a paradigm shift, which is this radical change in the thinking from an accepted point of view to a new belief. And I really believe that that's what's happening within the security marketplace that we have. And that new belief is really focused around the consumer. It's really focused, if you look at the technology advancements that have happened, some of the external threats that you see inside the marketplace now, and the customer expectations, organizations in the security industry are starting in service, whether it's manufacturers, service, or anybody, we're starting to have to really take a look at that consumer and drive value. And that has changed, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that happens. And to do that, if we focus on today, I think it's best that we start with yesterday. And after doing some research, and I won't get into all of this text, I put it here so you can all look at it later if you're interested in it. But if you do some research on it, you find that there's a lot of parallels to yesterday to today. And it's all been an evolution built on things that have happened all the way back from 1853 with the first electromagnetic alarm system, all the way down to 1885 when you had Alexander Graham Bell found AT&T. And if you look at the impacts of sort of how the industry itself has evolved, even into like 1909, where Walter Schlage invented a door lock that turned lights on and off. So this idea of it not just being about security, but then also how it fits within the smart home of how they would define it. To then when you move into the 1980s and the 1990s, you start to see really some escalation in the technology advancements, which have helped on the adoption of it. Everything from like in the 80s of the World Wide Web to the 1990s around Wi-Fi, and then really those early 2000s where you saw the smartphones get it brought into the marketplace. Now, I would argue though a little bit on the security side, we've kind of haven't progressed as quickly in a lot of ways. If you look at very panel-driven, silo-type systems, but still progress that has gone, and really wrapped around these ideas. If I was to summarize what you see from the sort of the systems of yesterday, very internal to the industry, new construction heavily, video was somewhat limited and not really mass marketed at that point, cellular based. Some would argue on the value of what it was bringing because a lot of it was driven off of fear and security and safety versus some other things that we'll get into. About deterrence and notification, but it worked for yesterday. And now we start to see what's happening today. And it does go back to this paradigm shift where I believe if you look again at that history to currently what's happening now, you start to see some things that happen like this evolution of the technology adoption and usage. If you just look back to like 2010, look at the rate compared to what it was earlier, as well as the mobile communication evolution. If you look up into 2000, moderate, I would call it. Good, yes. But then look what happens as you get into this third wave and the fourth wave. And I don't know about anybody else, but I would love to see growth that looks like what 5G is doing in 2020. And you just can imagine if you couple that with some of the other stuff that we talked about, how the rate of change is going to happen. Couple that with cloud computing, and we know the impacts that that's having. And then also, I would almost like bring this in broadside to it, was the e-commerce side of what's happened. So the channel expansion and opportunity for consumers to actually buy the products has changed from where before it was very heavily sort of door-to-door type sales to now you have these systems that you can buy online and do yourself and as such. So that increase has also happened to where I believe what you're seeing today, to which led us to really this sort of blending period that I like to call it, where we're currently in now, where you have newer technology wrapped with older technology. You've got startups with incumbents. You've got products that on the surface, maybe like you take some of the voice activated type systems that you have at first, when they're introduced, you have an imagination how they work, but now they are starting to turn into security type products. Touch panels have from a UI UX standpoint, although maybe not what they will be, but they still have evolved to more of the non-analog, if you would. And then a couple examples of some different business models that have been introduced to the marketplace. And when you put all that together, you start to see systems that start to look like this, which is a lot different than if we went back to the picture that we had of what security systems looked like in the past. You have everything from retrofit type systems to internal cameras, external cameras, wireless systems, wired systems, even to the point where the redefinition of what security is, where point systems versus just complete systems. So take a smart lock, for instance, like the one that we have here, which is the encode lock. If you look at that, that is defined to some people as a security product, right? Where you might think of it from a system standpoint, what would look more like the ring systems that you see here, or Residio's Honeywell system, or Alarm.com's that you have, so which are a bit more involved. But really, the opportunity now with how the technology is going is that the consumer has the opportunity to really start to define what security means to them. So if we take all that and we merge it with some of these emerging trends that we see, you can start to see how the rapid impact that we're going to start to see today, but it also lays that groundwork for tomorrow. So a lot of that would be coming from big tech impact trends, some of them positive, some of them negative, but still they impact the marketplace, whether that's impacting the user experience and who's driving that, to consumer awareness, and we see an impact and increase in that. But then also some questions around trust, like what does that look like now, and the expectations that really the consumer has. And that's been changing rapidly, and that's a trend that you see. So what is the expectation of quality when it comes to a security product? Is it a gadget or is it a security product? Is it both? Things like that you have to think about. What's the performance need to be? Service offerings that you have. You have these satisfaction sort of impacts, whether they're online or networked within the community. And really that overall experience has expanded, where before, again, it was just about safety, security, and a lot of times around deterrence and notification, where now the security systems, the expectations of what they do, sending keys and understanding awareness of the space and how it works within other ecosystems, all of that has changed, which has also opened up a lot different market segmentations that you have, which then increases the addressable market that we have. Where before it was new construction, probably more in the higher end to mid-range, to now you have from bottom coming up and bottom going down, or top going down, the opportunity, because it can be parts or pieces or complete systems, and the business models have changed, we have an opportunity to address a larger market, and I don't think that that's going to slow down. You also have cybersecurity trends. So you have a desire to communicate and understand what those mean. People are asking more questions around that. So having a point of view of what that means, whether that's around consumer privacy, or it's around the architecture of how it works, the expectations of what this means, the response to it, it's all driving the consumer purchasing decisions and expectation that we have. You're also seeing trends in the service side. I use people use the do it for me side, where it went from done just professionally to do it yourself to now this concept of where I can buy these systems online, let's say, and have the opportunity to have somebody come in and set it up for me. It's a new type of model that really the industry from a professional standpoint has to understand what to do with that. How do we do it? Where is it? Someone's going to fill that gap, and you have to decide how that's going to happen and where. We've got some computing trends. So not only are the impact on the edge, but sort of the artificial intelligence and machine learning that happens, but then how does that blend with the cloud and your computing tests, like with deep learning? So where do you do those things? Do I need to have that localized, or can it be up in the cloud? What's that blend look like? These trends are all impacting how those systems work, function, the expectations of them. You've got some sociocultural trends. So whether that's new classes like the aspirational class and their expectations on how they discover things and what they value. You've got network effects. I don't know in your neighborhood, but like in mine, there's purchasing decisions are influenced heavily by things like Nextdoor, things like the neighborhood app within Ring, things such as being able to just see within the community. Recently had a friend who, somebody broke into their house, and the ability for them to crowdsource video from all over the place to patch together a system that they were able to take to the police and really give a more in-depth understanding of what actually happened. That's interesting, and that's impacting people's expectations of how these systems work and how we as organizations need to be able to respond to that. I find the external, so if you look at security, a lot of times the only external side of security systems was sort of a siren, right? Whereas now the external side of how communal systems and your internal systems, how those blend together, and the expectations and positives and negatives that comes back, and the whole sort of change on the neighborhood watch, I think is morphing and is impacting the products and what homeowners expect. To now user experience trends, which is, I think, has really escalated the adoption in some of these areas, is the voice seems to be a very approachable way for people to interact with IoT products, and we're part of that, right? Now, you can argue whether voice is a great one currently now as it stands within the security, but it is going to make, and it is impacting, and the expectations would be that the way that it works will continue to change and morph to where it will be a viable way how people interact with these products. It also gives some of these home displays that before on the security side, they were just primarily in the wall. And the home displays, back in many years ago when I had my own audio video company, we did touch panels, but they were more around setting scenes. The new touch panels, if you would, of today that you see a lot from the big megatechs is changing the experience of how people interact and the expectations that they have with the products inside their home. So all of those things from a trend that are impacting actually how products are being developed now to the 1990s and in the early 2000s, you putting all those things together, you're seeing, I believe, that increased rate of not only development needs, but then also expectations from the marketplace. So if we take all that stuff together, what could it look like tomorrow? And I like to break these things out in today, tomorrow, and the future, and put a little timestamp of sort of 1 to 3 years out, what the sort of we can start to expect to see when it comes to the security industry, in my opinion. So on the top left, there's just a symbol that shows sort of this continued redefinition of what is safety, security, and how it's a feature within the smart home matters. So I believe where before it was sort of we brought to the marketplace and said, this is what safety and security is. Now, because of the parts and pieces aspect, the user experiences that we have and the technologies that are available, we're going to start to see in the next 1 to 3 years this redefinition and the ability to basically serve the market and meet the customer where they're at. Is going to be a big play. So no longer are you going to be able to sort of square peg round hole our solutions. You're going to have that flexibility to meet the definition of what that consumer has. I don't think anyone would argue that 5G, from everything that I've read and seen and been part of, is going to change a lot. And really the benefits from it, I think, will impact heavily and be a good thing. The cake is an example of sort of blended solutions. One of the the byproducts, I think, of all of this technology, but then also the external threats of people outside of the security industry are having is it's starting to make people partner more and have blended solutions that it's the whole 1+1 = 3 type scenario where historically maybe products were built sort of seed to flower to market by themselves and you kind of did some integrations, and now you're starting to build products with that expectation of sort of ecosystem in mind, and in the end is a better solution all around for the consumer. The lock picture that I put up there is to represent these smarter local systems and edge devices. 1 to 3 years from now, that is going to be increased heavily, where before they were kind of dumb edge devices that went back to the cloud or to a panel itself. Now you're going to see the smarts in the end and have a lot of impact into what that sort of experience would look like. I think the continuation of the whole neighborhood experience of what that looks like and expanding not just your system, but your system to other systems within it, sort of like the communal security side and that blend of public and private when it comes to security and safety is going to impact the way that these systems are adopted and the expectations that consumer have around them. That's going to be a real thing, and it's starting to see it now in different markets, but I think we'll start to see it even more. This reintroduction of what service means, this 24/7, there's going to be, again, a redefinition of that in the expectations of, what does the service level look like of a DIY product, or what is it a gadget versus a security product, and what does that mean from a service expectation, to also the impact of the professional on the bottom. So what does that look like, where historically a lot of people made good money off of selling hardware into the marketplace, where now there could be a blend of what some of the services with hardware, what that looks like. How do your systems as a professional need to be set up properly? What do the truck rolls look like? What does the money look like? How do you charge for those things? What does reoccurring possibly look like? So a complete impact on how that business looks a lot different. Not only is there a convergence of IT more, AV more into the security channel, I think we'll start to see that. Some of the 1 to 3 year out things also, like logical and physical access convergent, I think is going to happen even in the home. The increased understanding of importance of cybersecurity and the consumer privacy along with that is going to be important. I put SaaS, and not from the SaaS of software as a service, but security as a service. I think we'll start to see that even more than we currently have now, especially too if you couple with the community side. Maybe there's, like in my neighborhood, it's a small neighborhood, or even if you move into some other areas where there's gated communities, not like mine, but maybe like in the Florida, Phoenix area. So how do those play with the security and the products? Is it one big system to individuals? I think you're starting to see impacts there. And like I said, deeper partnerships that may not look on the surface like they make sense, but deep down, the value creation that it will deliver, I think we'll start to see non-traditional partnerships take hold in the 1 to 3 year out, and that is going to impact heavily into our business. So if we look at that as sort of what is going to happen tomorrow in the next 1 to 3 years, if I look out and say, okay, so for the next 3 to 5 years, trends will be built based off of that, which will also be built off of the early 2000s and 1990s as it goes, and we evolve from there. Sorry, take a sip. One of the big impacts, in my opinion, and you'll see especially from our organization, is the idea around seamless, this fluid experiences, especially as the edge devices get smarter, this idea that you have frictionless interactions and there's responsiveness to whether it's entering or exiting or while you're dwelling within, but not only just for you, but then also other people that are interacting with the space itself. When a delivery person rolls up, or your parents come, or a neighbor, or the local police, whatever it might be, that ability to be able to respond, there's going to be a lot more fluidity around that. And maybe, the Jetsons, and soon we'll get to where we see in the movies like Total Recall and the rest of them, where doors are moving and it's sort of that seamless type, great, nice, fluid experience. I think we definitely will start to see that. Start to be around predictive, the security systems to start to understand and predict things that will happen and respond to those. And it might even be done automatic, or it could be suggestive to where you can respond to that based off the situation that you have on that end. And then at that point, they become personalized. So it's based on you and who's in the house, who's around the house. It's no longer broad stroke experiences where every time I show up to my house, it's like the first time I've ever been there. It's like I'm there every day. It should know that it's me and my wife. It should know when it's her. It should know when we're both inside the house. It becomes a personalized type of experience, and we don't have to wear a card around our neck with, for it to know it's me. We're going to have devices and things, and it starts to understand that, and it's going to deliver some empathy. And I like to use this with empathy with technology because I feel like it's a thing that is stopping some of the adoption of what we currently have, and it really is around situational awareness. That the devices start to understand you, the time of day, possibly the mood. It could be things that have impacted. It could be things that are coming to the house, and it starts to respond personalized to you. And the security side and safety end of it, I actually believe the safety side of that is actually more important than possibly the security side. They're blended together, but how safety delivers empathy to you, I think, is going to be important. And the expectation from consumers is that that's the type of experience that they're gonna want and have. And then we're going to have blended technologies. I'm looking forward to the day where we don't have to worry about it. Is Zigbee, Z-Wave, 5G, Wi-Fi? It doesn't matter. It's about what it does. And the devices at the edge getting smarter and the ability for them to utilize the cloud aspects to deliver an experience. And the consumers don't have to figure this out. And they don't have to think about it, whether it's from a retailing standpoint or a selection standpoint or when they introduce new things. I believe that ubiquity aspect of this is upon us and will happen in that next 3 to 5 years. I think we'll start to see new channels and expansion of channels that are there, and there may be new ones and ones that will come out, but I think it's a positive thing that we'll start to see this opportunity for consumers to continue to get the solutions that they need and how they need them and where they want them versus being funneled into where they need to go get them, which will then also bring new business models. And will challenge the today models of what we have and will look very different tomorrow, whether that's freemium or premiums or however it might be. Thinking about that is going to massively impact how the expectations are of not only how the consumer consumes it, but how our businesses, how we run them. And with all of that, I feel okay about it. And I'm actually very, very excited about it. And I bring that up because there's a lot of tension and friction that gets created within the security industry of what has historically been a slower moving industry versus some of the other ones that are now being confronted with a lot of the stuff that's going to see that rapid growth. And the reasons why I'm excited about it is I actually think we have a great opportunity to drive true consumer value creation. Not just based off of safety and security and based off the fear, but the way that these impact and make it better for us to live within our homes and really take care of those spaces, but then how they interact with other things. All of those advancements in technology will allow that value creation to happen and go and expand beyond, which makes these things stickier and more value to the consumer themselves, so they have a better experience and a feel of it. Where if it's just based off of fear and safety security, that's a hard one where you don't want to necessarily always be just associated to that. You also want to be able to deliver that great experience. And I think by all of those advancements, it will allow that to happen. There'll be new and redistribution of value for people that are involved today, but then also new people. So there's this new opportunities that as security goes beyond the safety side, but then also is being able to deliver things like, I think a good example is everything that's going on right now on the delivery side. The security side and the safety end of it is impacting other businesses like people that deliver packages to your house, where historically, our industry has always been about keeping the bad guy out and we'd inconvenience all the people that should be there. Where now it's sort of flipped in that area where we can actually welcome the people that should be there and keep the bad guys out, but now create different value opportunities, which then you could leverage into more opportunities on that side, which is interesting. I believe brand promises are going to matter more especially into the market. And what I mean by that is I think people will start to understand and value too, as these products become more involved in the daily life of the people, there's an expectation and permission that some of these brands, like for instance ours, we've been doing this for 100 years. There's an expectation in the marketplace about how our product interacts with consumer, and that's a good thing. And I think long term, as the adoption happens and there's more people using it, the appreciation for understanding of that is going to matter. It does now, and it's going to matter even more. I think I'll continue on with the partnership side. I find that very interesting, and I think it's going to matter again even more by these impacts, because now the sort of convergence of these things together will allow people to focus where they are best and bring best of class for all the different areas to create a great solution for the consumer themselves. More consumer adoption and market opportunity. I think that's pretty self-sufficient what that happens. I think everything you read, whether it's a Parks or whomever, they're showing that the rate of increases is rapidly going, and it's only going to get more and better on that side. The technology advancements, not only is it more fun to play with those, if you would, from a development standpoint and innovation, but then also the ability to create great solutions. And then these new service opportunities. So I think the reinvention of the relationship that we have with consumers will change, and I think that's a good thing, not only from an expectation standpoint, but then also an appreciation on that side. So all of those things get me excited about what I believe will be the impacts of not only the trends of yesterday, the trends of today, but also the emerging ones that are forcing this sort of change that's happening within our industry. So with that, I've got 3 call to actions that I put together from this. It's a paradigm shift. I think we need to embrace it, and there are a lot of people and there's some that are resisting, but I think we all go in on this. I think we have a great opportunity in front of us, and look for those partnership opportunities that we talked about that bring value to the channel, the brand, the consumer, and business models for the long haul. And sorry, I spelled that wrong. It's Hall, H-A-U-L. Sorry. Where you see 1 + 1, it'll equal 3. And I really think there's no better opportunity than now for that to happen. And to start in your business, to start segmenting this a little bit different, because what has happened now is, like we talked about before, the marketplace has shifted and expanded. So the offerings and the channels and the opportunities and the solutions need to start to match those. And you have a great opportunity to deliver that. So with that, I hope to spark a discussion, gave you a bit of my point of view and offered you the 3 takeaways. So hopefully I delivered on what you were looking for. And with that, I want to thank you for taking the time and open it up to Q&A and hopefully have a conversation.
Awesome. I'm going to pop here, Lee. That was a terrific presentation and a great thought starter for this discussion. Just a quick reminder to everybody that's on the phone, if you do have questions for Lee, type them in the Q&A area on the bottom of your screen. Lee, I'm going to lead with a first question by Don Delchinos. So 2 years ago, security companies, including ADT and Xfinity Home, retrenched to their core businesses away from managing other smart home devices. You spoke about a lot of trends about, partnerships, embracing new technologies, also potentially managing other smart home devices. So in your point of view, do you believe that these companies will diversify again?
I can't speak specifically to ADT and Xfinity because I'm by no means an expert in their business strategies and what they have. But if I was to say, maybe take it a little bit up to security companies and that, and if we were to take the assumption that you've made that they've retrenched themselves to the core business, because some could argue whether they have or not, but I don't think that's the sort of the essence of your question. But this idea of organizations moving beyond their core business, which would be, let's say, just security, and getting into smart home devices and managing them, I think it's inevitable for some that will happen, and we're starting to see that. You're starting to see home systems, getting into the security side. So I don't see why we wouldn't see security going into that. And I do believe there will be markets where you'll have people that will be very specific to what they do and experts in that area from a professional standpoint. And then you're going to see people get actually mixed into where they are full whole home solutions. And we have that now, like organizations like the CEDIA channel that you have, those companies typically do a wide variety of what's there. So I do believe you'll start to see it escalate. Yes.
Cool. So, you spoke about predictive analytics, predictive security, which this is a question from Hans Harris, which would seem to me mean towards moving towards a minority report, if you will, that potentially could violate individuals' rights. And so we've seen this movement start to take place where there are neighborhood networks. There's a push and pull now with local police departments in terms of security. The question specifically from Hans is, how would that kind of information be incorporated with police or other security and emergency services?
Yeah, so I wish I had the answer to it. It would be great to be driving policy, if you would, around it. I'll give you my opinion, if you would, on that. Is I think the conversation has to happen, and what I'm excited about is the interest and involvement, and not just from the police standpoint, but I'll just call it general public, where again, historically, somewhat of cottage industry, if you would, from the security side, where we were, focused on safety and deterrence, and that to now being a larger portion of value creation. You could think of all the bad reasons of things that could happen there, and they need to probably be discussed. But I think the positive outweighs the negative on that side, and I believe needs to be handled properly, but needs to spark the conversation. And instead of I look at it, it's equivalent to me of sort of the robotics conversation that people have, where it's all doom and gloom, right? That humans are going to go away and everyone's going to be. But I think from my personal view and what I've read and have heard, and, there's that side, but there's also the sort of probably somewhere in the middle side of the value creation will be there, and if handled properly, it will make a positive impact. But I do believe it needs to start with an open dialogue to understand sort of what is the impacts and start to think about, because ignorance isn't an answer to it, right? Like when you see the stuff that's going on with Facebook and whatnot, it basically saying I don't know is probably not the best answer. So having the dialogue and building with those things in mind, so that they're built that way, but then also have sort of the public conversation, I think is important. Hopefully that answered.
Lee, this is a question doesn't have a name here, but of the technologies that you've mentioned, so 5G, machine learning, biometrics, what do you think is going to have the greatest impact on the security market in the near term?
I believe it will be my opinion is the edge computing side of things. I think the smarts at the edge, and you can couple that with AI and machine learning and the rest, but I really believe it's the ability for the computer processing to happen at the edge and what that will happen. Because I believe that impacts biometrics, play with that. I think 5G plays with that. I believe it's the devices themselves getting smarter that would drive the experiences that need to happen to create the value that consumers are looking for, which will impact the adoption of what's happening.
Another question that just came in was related to kind of Amazon and Walmart's moves to have delivery services directly into the home and into the kitchen, and in some cases into the refrigerator. Do you see this as a movement that's going to really become mass market relatively soon, or is it something that's just being trialed?
I think right now it's being trialed. I do believe it will become the norm, just like a lot of other things. I mean, talk about paradigm shift. I'm sure the typewriter people had this conversation about computers, and the horseshoe people had this conversation about the horse and buggies and the cars and that. I do believe that these types of services become mainstream. It's my opinion. Now, will they be strictly around grocery delivery like they currently are now? I don't believe so. I think it will expand. I'm super interested in how this impacts healthcare and things like that. I look at my parents and sort of where they live and how they live and what they do and their interaction that they have with services into their house. Myself, I have 2 young kids, both my wife and I, we both work. The day I remember we had the idea when first grocery delivery to the house, we're like, we don't need that. Like, I can go to the grocery store, right? And now we value the time that it saves us to go do that, and we use it regularly. It's now an everyday. So I think it's just time will tell that, whether it's they're doing it or somebody else. Yeah, take a look at everything from Uber to everything, at this point that becomes sort of normal ways. I think it's inevitable that it will happen. It just may not look the same as it currently does now.
Sounds good. 3 questions just came in. So the first one here from Dan Munson. What regions do you believe will be the innovators in this space? Will it begin in the US and spread, or are there other avant-garde countries actively grappling with these concepts?
Oh, I think it's happening now, and you can see there's definitely happening in the U.S., but you see areas like in Toronto and Singapore and in Europe area. So I believe there'll be different aspects, but I don't believe it'll be just one. I think it'll be what's nice is the globalization of this. I think you see by the people that are involved in the IoTC alone, the interest that's there. From it, it's global. From an adoption standpoint, yeah, I do believe that the U.S. leads in a lot of these areas, but I also know, like from living over in Hong Kong and watching my parents on some of we talk about delivery on that side, that stuff is not necessarily foreign over there as much as it is here, right? So it depends what specific area of innovation you're talking about that's going to see the rapid rate, but I think it's global.
And related to the locality that you're mentioning, what are the implications with respect to directives like GDPR and PII?
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer a nice to have, right? So it's sort of the development of these things with that in mind is there, and the impact of understanding that to it, where maybe 5 years ago you didn't have to think about that because it wasn't sort of a policy that you had to adopt and to go do. So now it's sort of it's somewhat built. You need to build it into the DNA of the organizations, of how things are built, how things are serviced, the way you communicate. It's a practice more than it is a thing, right?
So this is a question from Cam Hosen. Do you know of a product that is completely based on microphone and speaker without having any video? Cam imagines this would be a system that could see things without any video. It would have situational awareness by hearing sounds and voice, and would be an AI-based edge security appliance for both home and business customers. Are you aware of any type of product?
Well, I guess it depends, sort of, because there's probably more to that, right? But on the surface, kind of reminds me of what you're talking about with like Amazon Alexa, what they're doing on some of the stuff, and Google, where there's no camera on that, but there's a microphone and speaker, and it hears glass break. I know I think it was a Kickstarter locally of just sensor-based type systems where it's just, it understands sort of, it builds because if you look at how most people are in their home, they're habitual, right? Yeah, you just start to pay attention to how you grab your doorknob with your right hand, typically not your left. You get into the house, you drop your keys here, whatever you do when you go into the home, you're somewhat habitual. So it starts to build a pattern. And then it starts to understand the norms, and it responds when things are outliers, right? So there are some, I don't remember the name of that, but yes, there are systems. And what's interesting to me on that is that's a good example of, that could be entry level of how somebody would define security to them and safety, where a lot of times these systems are built where you're trying to solve every 100% use case that's out there. And you get a big bloated system in some cases, and then someone uses 100% of it. Where now you do have that opportunity to start from the bottom and go up and go for start at the top if you wanted to. So I find that interesting, but I don't have a name of that system offhand, but I can do a little bit of research and get back to you. But yeah. Thanks,
Lee. Here's a question from D. Eunice, and first he wants to thank you for pronouncing Toronto correctly. So hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly as well. The question is, how quickly is the overlap between the security and tech industries growing? And how can people in the security industry better equip themselves with new skills as this change continues to happen?
That's a good question. So how overlapped? I think it's overlapped. Like it's overlapped at this point on that side. You've got the big tech small tech, everyone's sort of involved in security, and all the numbers and that from the marketplace of what you see, the adoption of it is interesting enough that it's mainstream at that point, right? So to the second part of that of what can we do around that? My opinion, it comes down to being curious more than anything else, and open to that, and not taking somewhat hardline stances of, and moaning about yesteryear, but being open and curious, and bringing in new ideas and new people that maybe haven't historically been within the industry into it, so that we can embrace some of these technology trends that are happening at a far clip, but then also create a better line of value creation for consumers. Because in the end, I think that's what matters most to the adoption of this. And if we continue to do that and innovate around that and keep that center, that paradigm shift, and now the consumer in the center, I think in the end, we all will win.
Thanks. This is a question from Roger LaPlante. In regards to the partners that Allegion works with that provide more of the IoT connected devices rather than the hardware, what are you doing to assure that those solutions have the appropriate security? As an example, PKI and mobile app security.
Yeah, so it's a core competency of our organization. It goes back to sort of the brand promise that we have, and if you look at our history and the permission in the marketplace from our 100-year experience, it becomes a core competency of what we have. It's not a nice to have, or we'll get to that later. So I think that's probably the number one biggest thing that I can say. I mean, without getting into somewhat specifics on how we do mobile app security, if you would, I think the overhanging underlying thing that of how we approach it is that it's a core competency, and that's, I think, important to making sure that it's done properly, and then the details get done from there.
Great. Hans Harris says that you mentioned the kind of cross-pollination of services and also brought up medical devices being delivered. Do you see other verticals merging with security in these systems? And if so, which areas?
So I don't know if it's merging as much, but maybe impacting would be the word. Now, there will be some that will merge on that side. But I really believe the service side of just about anything. You see it from dog walking to car washing to house cleaning, whatever it might be. But the service end, where somebody needs to come from outside perimeter to the interior of your house to deliver some aspect of something. I'm very interested in how things happen of, like, if you take a look at like water or, emergency type stuff where you need to get somebody quickly into your home, like that experience, and how security products involved in that, because it's probably a problem if they show up to the house, you can't get in because you don't have a key, and the alarm's on, and the police come, and like it's just a complete mess, to where that seamless experience and purposely built products that work within ecosystems, I think will deliver a better user experience again, and create value creation of why I would make a buying decision for this thing. May not just be for the safety and security, maybe it's the sense of safety and awareness of how my house is, versus the tell me when something bad happens. But I think healthcare is right up there at the top. I mean, if you look at the way that, right now how it works, where you go to the doctor, and I watched it, my own personal family of, people that get sick, they go to the doctor, they have to go to the drugstore to go pick up stuff, and it's like the last thing you want to do. It's like, why? I don't understand why some of that stuff, if I can get, any type of cuisine sent to my, if I can get, pho at 2:00 in the morning sent to my house, why can't I get my medicine?
So questions come up about the senior market, and kind of there's seems to be a movement of companies that realize the potential of the senior market, but it's far from mainstream. What do you think needs to happen with respect to security products and systems to make it more mainstream to the boomer population?
I think the companies need to partner a bit more where the expertise lie, versus trying to do everything themselves, is number one, because I believe that 1 + 1 = 3, that's an example of 3 of creating real solutions that happen on that side. I think there needs to be an understanding of sort of how the hardware and software come together to create so that whether that's the experience side, maybe it's the affordability of it, maybe it's the business models of it, but it's really understanding that use case because I feel like that's one of those marketplaces that makes sense to everybody, but is really hard to solve. And I don't know if we're asking the right questions as an industry and are really looking at it from the right angle. And I believe if we brought some people maybe from the external in and maybe took a different view of it, I believe we can start to see the adoption rate. I also believe when I say partnerships too, it's like the insurance companies, like how do they play into that? How do the medical device companies, if that's what we're talking about, the medicine companies, how does government, I don't know, like there's a lot of players involved that I believe if we put the right minds on it could solve that to where we could see adoption of that use case increase than what it currently is now.
There's a question from Jonathan Ehrlich. There's an increasing trend towards integration. Many software companies, including Samsung SmartThings, Apple HomeKit, Amazon Alexa, want to be the central location for all smart home devices. How does Allegion think about manufacturing hardware that has software that can be easily integrated with these platforms? And are you developing APIs for all new software-enabled hardware devices?
So in general, yes. I mean, if you think about it, my whole team, their purpose is to focus on how our products work within ecosystems and partnerships. So I think that's a good example of putting the wood behind it, if you would, where we wouldn't have a team focused on it if it wasn't important from us on that standpoint. And to go along with that are the technical requirements and things that are needed in order for that to happen. So yes, that is. If you look at like when we launched the Encode Lock, that was built with launched with partnership with Amazon and specifically in the key team over at Amazon. So that product was built with ecosystem in mind, and we also lose sight of our commercial side of our business. We've been partnering with people for a very, very long time. We have an entire physical access control partnership. Our products have been sold for years in that way. So it's not a new thing necessarily, but it's definitely a focus that we do have. Yes.
And let's talk about the pro versus the DIY channel. So there's a huge push and pull about which is going to, of course, there's a market for both. But in your mind, where do you think the greatest potential lies? Let's call it in the next 3 to 5 years.
So I do believe, and I share. It's funny. A lot of times when we get in these conversations, people want them to be binary, like it's going to be either or, and I don't. I think it's an and. And I think it's also an introduction of either new service opportunity for existing or a new type of professional that's out there that's focused on that. If I'm specific to the question of where I think the biggest opportunity is, I really believe that DIY side, just from a fact of just the sheer size of the marketplace as you go downstream of it, that's there. So depending on what your ruler is of how you're measuring success or not, right? So per units type standpoint, I think that DIY side is just because that market is larger than probably a professional install. But I do think it blends when you get into sort of the do it for me side, and the market started like the servicing of the market, starting to understand how you can play within that, because I do believe complexity is still going to be there for a lot of people when it comes to, even if it's a do-it-yourself type product, when you want it to do certain things. And some people valuing their time over spending the time to go configure those things, that marketplace will continue to be there. So I believe it's a all ships rising type opportunity of adoption. But if from a pure numbers standpoint, I think the DIY is a market that we're just starting to see the adoption of.
Sounds good. Well, I think that takes us close to the end of this session. So I want to give a warm thanks and congratulations to Lee on a terrific discussion. I want to encourage everyone to continue this conversation. So if you have questions, your colleagues want to view this afterwards, it will be on our website at the end of this week. We'll send out a reminder. Also, let's continue this conversation over Twitter and LinkedIn, not just throughout the IoT webinar series, but also throughout the year. It's an important discussion that needs to be ongoing, particularly as it relates to partnerships. Lee has his information on the screen if you'd like to contact him directly. Thank you again, Lee, for a terrific discussion and for your partnership in the IoTC. Wishing everyone a great end of the week, and we'll hopefully see you again next week. Take care.
Thank you.